Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me tonight. I'm going to be looking at this zine that I mentioned a couple weeks ago when I did a flip through of some of my zine collection. It's called Security Culture, a Handbook for Activists. It's full of really good information that I think is pertinent to the folks watching my channel. And really just anyone who stumbles across it. As I've said before, and my feline is being quite active right now, so we may deal with him a bit in the video shooting tonight. As I said before, this has been a consistent issue that's come up throughout my time as an activist, and it's something that, if you don't take seriously, will cause disruption. So it's something to take seriously. It's something to, I think, share with others. So I would say if you have a small group, it might be a good idea to maybe watch this video together and talk about it. What are you up to? Yeah, so I'm going to give people a few moments to tune in. I'm also going to share the stream, and then we can kind of get started. I have one viewer. Hopefully some more people pop in, and then we can kind of get started. If not, I'll just give it a couple minutes and then get started. Yeah. Do I have any announcements I could talk about? Well, not really. Hey, you want to come up here? No? No, you want to disrupt, don't you? Come on. Figure it out, dude. You coming up or not? Come on. Have you been causing problems? You want to be on camera. Yeah. Yeah, you mad. Let it out. Aggression is a pretty important thing to look for in terms of security culture. You want to watch out for aggressive males. Always. You are aggressive, aren't you? You're a stinky aggressive kitty. Alright. No. Is it going to be like this all night? Like it was this morning? No. Also, I'd love if people watching could give any of their own perspective on security culture, maybe. Or if you're watching, and you are reminded of anything you want to talk about. Okay. That's not a bad idea, because in this zine, they actually list their email, which I'm going to put in the information on this video going up, so that if you have any ideas that you want to add for their next publication, I'm sure more of this zine has come out since then. They've done a couple different printings. You can, because, you know, individuals all have their own information and ideas that can be helpful when it comes to dealing with these issues. In terms of my own experiences with security culture, I've definitely dealt with people who are disruptive, who come to events to disrupt them. That can be a very common thing. Like people who they have a political agenda to grind, so they'll go to like an event that they don't agree with just to like cause just kind of commotion. I've dealt with that a few times. I've also dealt with like being spied on. I mean, I'm still spied on. And this is something that I'm continually like having to contend with because I've, you know, do so much publicly online. So there's that. Definitely have dealt with just disruptive people in general. But there's a lot of things to look for in terms of keeping yourself and others safe. And unfortunately, even if you're only like, I've spent like the last 10 years almost only working with women in activist circles, and I have to say it's not any different. You still are dealing with people who are not, could possibly potentially be agents, or who are there to disrupt or have some kind of other agenda, or maybe are working for like something else. There's also inter-community strife and things like that, and ways in which people will, in order to solidify power, will try to go after and marginalize others. I've dealt with a bit of that. Or just like people who form relationships with you under false pretenses. So I've dealt with that as well. I've also dealt with people trying to encourage me to engage in illegal activity, or who have like bragged about committing illegal acts in front of me, which this is another red flag. If you've ever committed any illegal act, I don't want to like say that I support that or not. I think one can look at my body of work and kind of figure that out for themselves. However, I do not support ever talking about it afterwards. That's what dumb people do, or dangerous people do, or cops do, okay? And it's something to just be wary of. Why is this person doing this? You have to ask yourself. Sometimes they'll do it so that they can appear cool, you know? But somebody who's trying to look cool in an activist space is also somebody who's going to be a problem for you because, again, they're not there for the right reasons. And unfortunately, like, you have to use your discernment when working with other people, because a lot of the times people get wrapped up and sucked into political stuff that really have no idea why they're there. Like, they got on to some sort of like path, and consequently they've got no business being there, but they are, and those people too can be disruptive to people who are trying to do a thing. So it's just important to like use your judgment first and foremost, and to be mindful of like suspicious behaviors. Another thing to like look out for is like if somebody says one thing but does another consistently. You know, that's been common, and this is another problem within like radical feminist spaces specifically. Women and why I've kind of like gotten really fed up with these type of groups, because I see that a lot of women just want a place to complain or be like transphobic in, for lack of a better word. Because really, I mean, it's been a consistent issue where it's like the whole conversation is just about like all of these external problems instead of dealing with like what women ourselves are going through. And I think it's just kind of, whoa, hey, oh God, it's just kind of too much, you know, when you're like externally focused. Radical feminism should be about, you know, changing yourself so that you can change society, I feel. So anyway, these things are things to be mindful of. Like if somebody is like, I'll give an example, like if someone is like very virulently anti-pornography, but like say clearly has a husband or a man that's like, you know, using porn and prostituted women, like this is something to be kind of mindful of. Like it's not really a review, we're gonna read it together. And hello, Anyang, nice to see you. Is it, I'm still really struggling with Hangul. Is it me? No, is it Elong? Erong? No. Whatever. I'll figure it out. Thanks for being here. So anyway, I think I've rambled enough and spent enough time. Yeah, it's over 11 minutes. So let's get started. There's 7 of you here. Well, welcome. Hello, JK. Welcome. You're new to my channel. I hope you like it. I'm going in a new direction lately. So this is an experimental time for me. And I'm going to be going through and like showing you a lot of like things that I've collected over the years and kind of giving you the information I can from it. Okay, so security culture, a handbook for activists. Let's get started. Introduction. Resistance has been on the rise for the past few years, with activists adopting more and more effective tactics for fighting back. Our increased activity and effectiveness has meant that the RCMP, FBI, and local police have continued to escalate their activities against us. As well, the events of September 11th and ensuing state hysteria are no small footnote to the, I'm reading this upside down by the way, so I'll be slow, way that our radical and revolutionary movements have and will be targeted by repressive state forces. And so they mentioned the RCMP. This is a Canadian document. But regardless, it works for most nations. Like this is going on in all nations. I also have to say something too. This summer when I was working with specifically the women from the CoRad Femme channel, I received an email from a woman trying to get me not to work with them. And I was immediately suspicious because the letter was, or this email was like perfectly drafted and the English was perfect. And so immediately I was like, you know, because what I had been communicating with one of them was kind of, you know, more limited. So I thought to myself, this can't be right, you know? So I know that there are South Korean women watching too. You are being surveilled as well, and it's important to recognize that and to be suspicious if women are saying one thing but doing another, okay? Like really watch the people you're working with closely. I also have noticed that there has been a trend to kind of de-radicalize, a push back against the more militancy of the movement, and specifically women who are advocating the 4B lifestyle. You really need to like, just my advice, looking at this as an outsider, they're trying to make your movement more palatable to the mainstream, so that it'll be de-radicalized. I mean, this is how they neutralize the radical elements of all political movements, which is to basically mainstream them. And of course it's happening with radical feminism. The amount of women that I've seen just over the past year or so who have become radical feminists is absurd, especially given that they're not. So it's really important to ensure that when we are talking about these kind of revolutionary politics and radical politics, that element doesn't get lost, because all of a sudden you have radical feminism associated with extreme right-wing people and ideologies. And this is another thing too, before I go on, the pressure to accept femininity is also a problem. And a part of that is also about making the movement more appealing to mainstream normal folk, which again will make it less good. You're 15, you're watching something in another language from another country. I'm impressed. I'm really impressed, and I'm also impressed at how many young women are participating in your movement. Okay, anyway, sorry to go off on a tangent, but I remembered that was something that had happened this year that really disturbed me. The fact that, and this woman who wrote to me also had asked me to speak to Peach Yogurt, who I don't know, and trying to get me to convince her not to work with this woman who came to the US and was traveling around kind of trying to meet other radicals. That was a real fucking problem, and it pissed me off. And I don't know if anybody's watching, but that was a mistake. Okay. So, let's go on. If we want our direct action movement to continue, it is imperative we start tightening our security and taking ourselves more seriously. Now is the time to adopt a security culture. Good security is certainly the strongest defense we have. This is a handbook for the Canadian activist who is interested in creating and maintaining security awareness and culture in the radical movements. We are always looking for contributions, so please feel free to email securitysite@tau.ca with any images or text you think belong in a handbook such as this. This is the 3rd edition of this zine that we have put out in order to add and improve on the original text. Thanks for the work of the collective opposing police brutality in Montreal for their help. There will be future editions of this handbook, so keep putting forward suggestions to us. We hope that you will put the material contained within to good use. Now more than ever is the time to act. Security culture. What it is, why we need it, and how to implement it. Activism and state repression. This pamphlet has essential information for anyone associated with groups advocating or using economic disruption or sabotage, theft, arson, self-defense from police or more militant tactics. The advice that follows also applies to anyone associated with groups practicing civil disobedience, especially since people often work in several groups at the same time and gossip travels freely between them. And I some of this I've already gone through a few times before. Even if you're never, even if you've never expressed your politics by doing property damage, pitching cobblestones, or or getting arrested for civil disobedience, even if you think you have nothing to hide, what does this say? These guidelines, are presented here to enhance your personal safety as well as the overall effectiveness of our movements. The simple reality is that governments in industrialized countries target groups that advocate economic sabotage and groups that don't. Movements that are militant and movements that are markedly pacified. The government security machinery serves the elitist political and economic objectives of capitalism. There are over 250 political prisoners in Canada and the US that can testify to this from first-hand experience. By adopting a security culture, we can limit or neutralize counterintelligence operations meant to disrupt our political organizing, be it mainstream or underground. Yes, I am very grateful to the women at the Korean Radical Feminist channel for translating my work and getting me to talk, meet new people specifically and kind of influence other women. So glad you're here, and I'm grateful for them. They're very awesome, and they've also taught me a lot about being a radical. Peasant rebels, communards, liberationists, abolitionists, labor organizers, revolutionaries from large uprisings challenging the entire political structure to isolated environmental and social struggles. People have, what does that say? Constantly worked to create a better world. The response of governments has always been repression to preserve the status quo. And this is very important. It doesn't really matter what your cause is, okay? The whole point is to maintain the status quo. So this is something to keep in mind when you're dealing with kind of counter-revolutionary attitudes in your movements and just the liberalization of them. It's really important to understand what that's serving. It's serving the maintenance of society and things as it is, and you should always be challenging and making things different. Historically, government surveillance and harassment has increased relative to the ascendancy of direct action movements. Minimizing the destructiveness of political repression requires that we implement and promote a security culture within our movements. So what is a security culture? It's a culture where the people know their rights and, more importantly, assert them. Those who belong to a security culture also know what behavior compromises security, and they are quick to educate those people who, out of ignorance, forgetfulness, or personal weakness partake in insecure behavior. This security consciousness becomes a culture when the group as a whole makes security violations socially unacceptable in the group. Security culture is about more than just targeting specific behaviors in individuals. Hey, wow. Such as bragging, gossiping, or lying. It is also about checking movement behaviors and practices as a whole to ensure that our own oppressive practices don't feed into intelligence operations being carried out against our community. This is very important as well. For example, racism or sexism in the movement. Hey, no. Racism or sexism in the movement can help to spread division, make some people more open to infiltrators, those who would feel marginalized by group practices, and create openings that can be used by state operatives. Obviously, our movements have a lot of work to do before we address the bigger questions. What's important here is to recognize how oppressive behaviors play into bad security culture overall. So, I mean, it isn't just a matter of like somebody, maybe doing something illegal and bragging about it. Like, it's a problem if a culture of racism is like tolerated, or like, for example, like if you have like people who consistently are doing things that are hurting the marginalized people in the community, like, or people who face multiple oppressions, specifically like in the women's movement, that's something that is a problem because it makes those people even more vulnerable. And that's the real issue here. It's much easier for the state to also pick off like revolutionaries and radicals who maybe are poor, or who maybe are from a racially oppressed background. Okay, Eli, and you're a sad, pathetic little man. I mean, it's a Saturday night, and this guy is like, okay. I'm not even going to answer that question. That's ridiculous. Okay. Insecure practices. Activists like to talk. We generally can spend hours and hours discussing theory, tactics, and strategy. Mostly this is useful in building our analysis and our work, but in other cases, this can be dangerous. What not to say? Okay. To begin with, there are certain things that are inappropriate to discuss. These things include your involvement or someone else's involvement with an underground group, someone else's desire to get involved with such a group, asking others if they are a member of an underground group, your participation or someone else's participating in an action that was illegal, someone else's advocacy for such actions, your plans or someone else's plans for a future action. Essentially, it is a bad idea to speak about an individual's involvement, past, present, future, with illegal activities. There are unacceptable topics of discussion regardless of whether it is rumor, speculation, or personal knowledge. And now that's another thing, like if anybody asks you or tries to talk to you about that stuff, no, not a safe person. And you might just say to them, I think that's an unsafe behavior to participate in discussing such matters, and I will not participate. Like, period. Please note, this is not to say that it is incorrect to speak about direct action in general terms. It is perfectly legal, secure, and desirable that people speak out in support of monkey wrenching and all forms of resistance. The danger lies in linking individual activities to specific actions or groups. 3 exceptions. There are only 3 times that it is acceptable to speak about specific actions and activities or an activist involvement. The first situation would be if you were planning an action with other members of your small group, your cell or affinity group. However, these discussions should never take place over the internet, email, phone line, through the mail, or in an activist's home or car, as these places and forms of communication are frequently monitored. The only people who should it says, dear this discussion, would include those who are actively participating. Anyone who is involved does not need to know. Anyone who is not involved does not need to know, and therefore should not know. The second exception occurs after an activist has been arrested and brought to trial. If she or he is found guilty, this activist can freely speak of the actions for which he or she was convicted. However, she or he must never give information that would help the authorities determine who else participated in illegal activities. The third exception is for anyone the third exception is for anonymous letters and interviews with the media. This must be done very carefully and without compromising security. Advice on secure communication techniques can be found at security.tau.ca. These are the only situations when it is appropriate to speak about your own or someone else's involvement or intent to commit illegal direct action. Security measures. Veteran activists only allow a select few to know about their involvement with direct action groups. Those few consist of the cell members who they do the actions with and no one else. Okay? This is very important. If you are going to do this type of activity, you only discuss it amongst the people who are doing it, period. The reasons for these security precautions is obvious. If people don't know anything, they can't talk about it. When activists who do not share the same serious consequences know who did it, an illegal direct action, they are far more likely to talk after being harassed and intimidated by authorities because they are not the ones who will go to jail. Even those people who are trustworthy can often be tricked by the authorities into revealing damaging and incriminating information. It is safest for all cell members to keep their involvement in the group amongst themselves. The fewer people who know, the less evidence there is in the long run. Okay? And this has been a problem for me in the past where, like, it's unfair, and if anyone is telling you about something they did, it's an unfair thing to put on you as well. So you have a right to tell people that you're uncomfortable with certain conversations, just because, like, once you know something, you know it, and that's a problem. Because if you weren't involved, you shouldn't know. Security violating behaviors. In an attempt to impress others, activists may behave in ways that compromise security. Some people do this frequently. They are habitually gossiping and bragging. Some activists say inappropriate things only when they consume alcohol. Many activists make occasional breaches of security because there are momentary temptation to say something or hint at something that shouldn't have been said or implied. In most every situation, the desire to be accepted is the root cause. And that's another thing that can really, in my opinion, violate security, is if you're concerned with being accepted, then what is going to come into place is a lot of, like, overriding your own instincts. It's very important as an activist to be instinctual and to act from your gut and not kind of worry so much about what others think of you, because it's a problem. And this is another thing that I also learned from just talking to and working with the Korean feminists that I've met. Like, there is no talking at their events. You go to a thing and you do it, and you only speak, like, from what I understand, you only speak if it is necessary to. And that is great because it prevents cults of personality from forming, and it also prevents, like, situations like this. Those people who tend to be the greatest security risks are those activists who have low self-esteem and strongly desire the approval of their peers. Certainly, it is natural to seek friendship and recognition for our efforts, but it is imperative that we keep these desires in check so we do not jeopardize the safety of our other activists or ourselves. People who place their desires for friendship over the importance of the cause can do serious damage to our security. And that has been a problem in my own life, actually, which is part of why I'm revisiting this. Like, I have wanted to be liked or be recognized or to make friends, and as such kind of gotten into situations with people who I shouldn't have. And while nothing like terrible has happened, the fallout of it was really bad, and the disruption to my own work just on my channel alone it never should have happened. So I'm reading this to you like with the hope that you will learn something here from it, and also like hear from me that these are serious things and I've also experienced them. The following are examples of security violating behaviors. Lying. To impress others, liars claim to have done illegal actions. Such lies not only compromise the person's security, as cops will not take what is said as a lie, but also hinders solidarity and trust. Gossiping. Some people think they can win friends because they are privy to special information. These gossips will tell others about who did what action, or if they don't know who did it, guess at who they think did what actions, or just spread rumors about who did it. This sort of talk is very damaging. People need to remember that rumors are all that are needed to instigate an investigation or even lay charges. Okay? So, yeah. Bragging. Some people who partake in illegal direct action might be tempted to brag about it to their friends, or they're not friends. This not only jeopardizes the bragger's security, but also that of the other people involved with the action, as they may be suspected by association. As well, the people who she or he told can be charged as accessories after the fact. An activist who brags also sets a bad example. Okay, and I just want to say this too. I want to read this to you again. You can be charged as an accessory if you know about something. Okay, so this is why it's really, really important. If somebody tells you about some illegal shit they did, like, you stay away from that person, and you put a stop to that right away. You say, no, I don't need to know this information, because like, they've just put you in danger. You are now an accessory for knowing about it. Okay, people should not be putting you in that circumstance. Okay. Indirect bragging. Indirect braggers are people who make a big production of how they want to remain anonymous, avoid protests, and stay underground. They may not come out and say that they do illegal direct action, but they make sure everyone within earshot knows they are up to something. They are no better than braggers, but they try to be more sophisticated about it by pretending to maintain security. However, if they were serious about security, they would just make a good excuse as to why they are not active or why they can't make it to the protest. Concealing sensitive information from even trusted comrades is far better than jeopardizing underground work. Educate to liberate. The unfortunate truth is there are some security ignorant people in the movement, and others who have possibly been raised in a scene that thrives on bragging and gossiping. It doesn't mean these people are bad, but it does mean they need to inform themselves and learn about personal and group security. Even seasoned activists make mistakes when there is a general lack of security consciousness in our groups. And I have to say this too, it's important to not be the only radical around, because that will make you incredibly insecure as well. And that's where those of you who are reading this can help. We must always act to inform persons whose behavior breaches security. Okay? So it's important to speak up. If someone you know is bragging about doing an action or spreading security compromising gossip, it is your responsibility to explain to her or him why that sort of talk violates security and is inappropriate. You should strive to share this knowledge in a manner that encourages the person's understanding and changes her or his behavior. It should be done without damaging the person's pride. Show your sincere interest in helping him or her to become a more effective activist. Keep your humility and avoid presenting an attitude of superiority. An insensitive approach can raise an individual's defense and prevent them from listening to and using the advice offered. The goal of addressing these issues with others is to reduce insecure behavior rather than showing how much more security conscious you are. Share your concerns and knowledge in private so that the person does not feel as if they are being publicly humiliated. Addressing the person as soon as possible after the security violation increases effectiveness. If each of us remains responsible for discussing security information with people who slip up, we can dramatically improve security in our own groups and activities. When people recognize that lying, gossiping, bragging, and inappropriate debriefing damages both themselves and others, these behaviors will soon end. By developing a culture where breaches of security are pointed out and discouraged, all sincere activists will quickly understand. Dealing with chronic security problems. Let's take a moment. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee. Okay. So what do we do with activists who repeatedly violate security precautions even after being informed several times? Unfortunately for them, the best thing to do is to cut them loose. Discuss the issue openly and ask them to leave your meetings, base camps, and organizations. With law enforcement budgets on the increase, new anti-terrorist laws that call for stiffer sentences for political actions, and with courts handing down long sentences for political crimes, The stakes are too high to allow chronic security offenders to work among us. By creating a security culture, we have effective defense against informers and agents who try to infiltrate groups. Imagine an informer who every time that ask another activist about their activities receives information about security. It would frustrate the informer's work. When other activists discovered that she or he continued to violate security precautions after being repeatedly informed, there would be grounds for isolating the person from our groups. And that would be one less informer for us to deal with. A brief premiere on the Canadian state security apparatus. Since this is kind of specific to Canada, I'll just kind of go through what I've highlighted here. It is incredibly important that we don't fall into the trap of using our awareness of security issues to shut other people out of our growing movement. One of the key aims of the FBI's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, operations against the Black Panthers and American Indian movement, AIM, was to spread distrust and paranoia so that these activists would be reluctant to integrate new people into their struggles. A security culture can exist in a large movement. Indeed, it is one indication of a movement's strength. Arming ourselves with knowledge about how the system works and works against activists is essential in building security culture. The golden rule: silence. It needs to be stressed throughout our movements that no one is under any legal obligation to provide to the police any more information than one's own name, address, and birth date. And this only if one is under arrest. That is it. Saying anything more jeopardizes security. Even answering seemingly insignificant questions can assist the police in developing personality profiles on a range of activists. It may not be evidence, but it is used to give police leads on other suspects and construct intent during legal proceedings. The only principled response to police questioning when under arrest is to say nothing more than your name, birth date, and address. If questioned further, you can simply say, "I have nothing to say except in the presence of my lawyer." The Communications Security Establishment is an agency of the National Defense War Department, which has been long clouded in secrecy. They collect and process telephone, fax, and computer communications of foreign states, corporations, and individuals. The federal government uses the intelligence gleaned from the data to support troops abroad, catch terrorists, and future and further, I misread that because I'm reading upside down, remember this. And further Canada's economic goals. What that means is up to them. Okay. Police try to control with fear. Don't be intimidated. Remember, if an agent comes knocking, do no talking. I see you are interested in getting a copy of this. What I would suggest for you is to come back after the broadcast is over, and I will leave a link in the description to the website where you can get this. And they'll have a newer copy. This copy is many years old. This came out not long. This came out in like the aughties, so it's probably like 10 years old. Okay, so this is a nice little piece. Everything you've ever wanted to know about informers and infiltrators. Dun dun dun. Infiltrators seek information on most radical groups. The return of mass mobilizations and radical actions in anti-globalization, anti-poverty, anti-racism, and anti-police brutality demonstrations, as well as poverty. As well has drawn attention from the state's secret police. More infiltrators will be sent into our ranks to try to bribe, entice, or manipulate individuals. The extent to which they are able to infiltrate our groups depends on our seriousness and responsibility in learning about, promoting, and working within a security culture. Radical movements can learn to better identify covert enemies in our projects. Once identified, appropriate action is needed to undo, contain, or remove the danger. This section is intended to arm you with information on how to spot and deal with informers, infiltrators, and provocateurs in our ranks. Who is an informer? There are actually two kinds of informers. The deliberate informer is an undercover agent on the payroll of government or industry. The second type is the activist turned informer, okay? And this is important to understand as well, because there are many people who are informers who started out as legitimate activists and then got churned. And oftentimes how that happens is that they've engaged in illegal activities and they are now being forced to, as a condition to remain free, to inform on other people. So this is why it's important to really observe people and how they behave, as opposed to what they say, What did the suffragettes say? They said deeds, not words, okay? Judge activists by their deeds, all right? If they say one thing and do another, that's a big warning sign, Big warning sign. Let's discuss the deliberate informers first. They are often difficult to identify. Informers can be of any age and any profile, but they do have a few discernible methods or modus operandi. They hang around, the hang around type. They are persons who regularly show at meetings and actions, but generally don't get involved. They collect documents, listen to conversations, and note who's who. This observation role is relatively inactive. The sleeper type is similar to the hang-around modus operandi, except that their absorption of information is used to activate their role at a later date. Okay, so these can be people who come around and gather information and then get involved later. The novice type presents a somewhat more active role, but confines themselves to less prominent work. They don't take initiatives, but the work they do is valued. This helps them build trust and credibility. The super activist, okay? The woman who plagiarized my work earlier this year would fall under this category. They come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they are everywhere. Whether it is a meeting, protest, or an action, this person will be right in the thick of it. Keep in mind, however, that this can also be the mark of a new activist whose enthusiasm and commitment is so strong that she or he wants to fight the power every minute of the day. It should be said that with several of these modus operandi, the behavior is hard to distinguish from a sincere new person's involvement. How do we tell them apart? Well, a planted infiltrator will ask a lot of questions about the direct action groups, individuals, and illegal activities. She or he may suggest targets and volunteer to do reconnaissance as well as take part in the action. Infiltrators also try to build profiles on individuals, their beliefs, habits, friends, and weaknesses. At the same time, infiltrators will shield their true selves from other activists. Anyone who asks a lot of questions about direct actions isn't necessarily an infiltrator, but they are someone you should be careful with. At the very least, they need to be informed about security issues. New activists should understand that direct action tactics can be risky, though some risks are worth taking, and that asking a lot of questions endangers people. If the person persists in asking questions, there is a problem and appropriate measures must be taken. Activists who can't understand the need for security should be shunned and kept away from the movement. Some types of infiltrators stay in the background and offer material support. Others inform and may have nothing to do with the group or action, but initially have certain plans and tipped off the police. But initially heard certain plans and tipped off the police. Among the more active types of infiltrators can be a gregarious person that quickly wins group trust. Some infiltrators will attempt to gain key forms to control, such as of communications or secretariat. So people who get involved and want to do that stuff immediately. Finances. Other informants can use charm and sex to get intimate with activists to better spy or potentially destabilize group dynamics. And I've also dealt with this kind of thing where I've had just suspicious women try to get involved with me to try to disrupt kind of my life and my activism. As a result, I've had that happen a couple of times. So now, whether those women are agents or not, I can't say, but I do know that, like, you need to be aware of, like, how people are encouraging you to behave. If they want you to act out of character, or if they want you to, like, get involved in doing, like, a lot of disruptive things, or they want information on other people, that's a sure sign that you're dealing with someone dangerous. Active infiltrators can also be provocateurs specializing in disruptive tactics, such as sowing disorder and demoralizing meetings or demos. Heightening conflicts. Okay. People who go out of their way to heighten conflicts. So let's say you're pissed off about something, you've had some kind of disagreement, and you have someone come in and, like, try to make it worse, or, like, start feeding you, like, information about someone, like, that, you know, you've had a disagreement about. You need to watch that shit, because that person can very well be trying to manipulate you. So yeah, heightening conflicts, whether they are interpersonal or about action or theory, or pushing things further with bravado and violent proposals. Infiltrators often need to build credibility. They may do this by claiming to have participated in past actions. All right, thank you, Suni. You know, and as I said, I will include a link to where you can read this on your own time and possibly get it translated. I would recommend this for Korean women who are looking to translate English literature. This is an important document, and it's information that applies to pretty much any nation. You may need to change some of the information, or get, like, information from your own nation about, like, what your rights are if you're arrested, etc. But it is something that I think should be drafted, because, as I said, like, you're being monitored, period. Also, infiltrators will try to exploit activist sensibilities regarding oppression and diversity. Okay, this is another thing. If you care, right, about those issues, you can be targeted. And I do care about those issues, so it's, like, something that has been an issue for me. Intelligence organizations will send in someone who will pose as a person experiencing the common oppression of the particular activist group. For example, in the 1960s, the Weather Underground Weathermen, a white anti-imperialist armed struggle in the U.S., was infiltrated by an ordinary Joe informant with a working class image. Black war veterans infiltrated the Black Panther Party. A fresh example of police infiltration and manipulation tactics is that of Germanuel, a group targeted for arrest 2 days prior to the April 2001 anti-FTAA demonstrations in Quebec City. 5 months prior, the police set up a false transport company and specifically posted opportunities for employment in the vicinity of our Germanuel members seeking employment. Okay, so The police fucking created a fake company to try and trap these activists. That's scary. The trap worked. Tipped off by an initial informant, 2 undercover cops worked for 4 months in the group. This operation resulted in the media hyped dismantlement of the group on the eve of the summit. 7 Germanule members were arrested, 5 of whom spent 41 days in preventative custody, only to be released under draconian bail conditions. The police's covert action was in part about dismantling the group, but it was also about creating a media propaganda campaign to justify the police state security for the summit. Background checks, an essential tool. What are some ways of looking into the possibility that someone is an informer? Firstly, unless you have concrete reasons or evidence that someone is an infiltrator, spreading rumors will damage the movement. Rumors that you do not hear to be, rumors that you do hear of should be questioned and traced back. A person's background can be looked into, especially activism they claim to have participated in or in other places. Do your contacts in those places know of the person? Their involvement? Did problems ever come up? One important advantage of having links with faraway places is that it makes it more difficult for informers to fabricate claims about their activities. What are a person's means of living? Who are her or his friends? What sort of contradictions exist between their professed ideals and how they live? Okay, so this can be an example of like, what are the conflicts between what they claim to believe in and how they're living? Okay, and there's a big culture right now of like not going here, but it's important. Okay, because this is a way of determining whether somebody's like legitimate. One of our strengths as activists is our ideas and values, our counterculture, our attitudes towards the dominant society. Our sincerity in discussing these things is also a way of learning about each other. When planning for new actions, care must be taken concerning who is approached. As little as possible should be said about the actual actions plan until a person's political philosophy, ideas about strategy, and levels of risk they are willing to engage in have been discussed on an abstract basis. If there is a strong basis for believing this person might be interested in the action, then the general idea of the action can be run by them. Only when they have agreed to participate do they come to the group to discuss actions details. During the trials of activists, police often reveal the kinds of information that they have gathered concerning our groups and activities. Note what Note what revelations come out of these trials. What are the possible and likely sources of the information? Speak to persons that have been arrested and interrogated to see what they may have said to the police or discussed in their jail cell. Placing infiltrators in social justice and revolutionary movements is a established practice. It was done to the Black Panthers, American Indian Movement, the Front de Libération du Québec, and the peace, anti-war, and anti-nuclear movements on a large scale. Small groups, such as affinity groups or working groups of larger, more open organizations, need to be especially careful with new members. Direct action organizing is ideally done with long-standing, trusted members of the activist community. This doesn't mean that that no one else should ever be allowed into these groups. On the contrary, if our movements is to continue to grow, new people should be welcome and recruited. We just need to keep security in mind and exercise caution at all times. The unwitting informer. Possibly an even greater threat to our movements than the covert operative is the activist turned informer, either unwittingly or through coercion. The unwitting informer is the activist who can't keep his or her mouth shut. If someone brags to you about what they've done, make sure this person never has any knowledge that can incriminate you, because sooner or later the wrong person will hear of it. These activists don't mean to harm, but their bragging can be very damaging. It is your responsibility to instruct these people on the importance of security culture. The other type of activist informer is the person who cracks under pressure and starts talking to save his or her own skin. Many activists get drawn into situations they are not able to handle, and some are so caught up in the excitement that they either don't realize what the consequences can be, or they just don't think they'll ever have to face them. Keep in mind that the categories of planted informer and activist turned informer can and have been blurred. In 1970, during the height of the FLQ's activities, Carole DeVault, a young Parti Québécois activist, was drawn to the FLQ, but then became a paid police agent. Her activism was with the PQ. She disagreed with the heavier FLQ's actions, since it threatened the legitimate work of the PQ. Her involvement with the FLQ was as a planted police informant. Okay, so this is a case of someone who is theoretically on the same side, and this is why it's also important to understand that just because someone should be on your side doesn't mean they are. And we'll just let that siren go by. Just because somebody should be on your side doesn't mean they are. Or they could have similar politics, but they're not as radical as you. Radicalism matters, okay? And yeah, these people sometimes, will even like another case of this, like very famously, is like Gloria Steinem, who is a very famous and well-known American feminist, right? She is also known for giving information to the CIA about feminists, more radicals in the movement. So you also have to understand that, like, you know, just because someone is like a feminist or whatever doesn't mean they're on your side. Um, and they may have, just be wary, and don't trust, trust what you can see and discern, and like be aware that like this is going on. We have to know the possible consequences of every action we take and be prepared to deal with them. There is no shame in not being able to do an action because of responsibilities or circumstances that make it impossible for you to do jail time. At this point in your life, as long as capitalism and all of its evils exist, there will be resistance. In other words, there will be plenty of great actions for you to participate in when your life circumstances are more favorable. Okay, and this is also like saying that it's okay to like say no to doing an action. You don't have to if you don't want to. It is perfectly all right not to, because there are real consequences. If others are dependent on you to support, you aren't willing to lose your job or drop out of school or ruin your future career, don't do the action. If you are addicted to the illicit group and or have a lengthy criminal record, the cops will use this to pressure you for information. If you don't feel capable of detoxing under interrogation and brutality, or doing a hell of a lot more time than your comrades, don't do the action. Make certain that you talk with others in your affinity group about situations that make you uncertain whether you should be involved in particular actions, especially those that are at a high risk of being criminalized. Remember, there is no excuse for turning in comrades to the police, and those activists that do effectively excommunicate themselves from our movements. We must offer no legal or jail support to those activists who turn in others for their impact on our movements is far-reaching and can have devastating effects. Covert action other than infiltration. Covert or special action from police and secret services is also done outside the group with or without infiltration. These efforts include intimidation and harassment, blackmail and manipulation, propaganda, informing employers and security checks, as well as physical sabotage like theft and arson. Okay? And intimidation and harassment can include visits from Secret Service agents, calling you or your partner by their first name on the street, thefts when obvious thefts where obvious clues are left. Police will try to blackmail people if they want to recruit or neutralize them. Okay, and this is kind of how, like, they have the activists turned informers. Okay, so this is this is the way it's done, like, which is part of why it's important to keep your home secure as well, and not have any of this like information about anything you may be doing in it, you know, anything illicit you may be doing anyway. Police uses propaganda in an attempt to poison the atmosphere and manipulate media and public opinion. In December 1971, when the FLQ was near its end and heavily infiltrated, the RCMP issued a false FLQ communique in the name of the Minerve cell. The communique adopted a hard-line denouncing the abandonment of terrorist action by a well-known activist, Pierre Vallières, and urging the continuation of armed struggle. Okay. So this is oftentimes like police will infiltrate movements and like go really hard in an attempt to disrupt. Okay. So this is another thing too, is like things seem to be coming out of nowhere. Like the authorities will lie, and they will use media to manipulate public opinion. So that's also something very important to understand. Like, these state apparatus are charged with protecting the status quo, and they are not above, lying to manipulate the public about what's really going on and what these groups actually stand for. So this kind of thing would, in most people's mind, be upsetting and would cause this group to be even further destroyed from within and without. If the public is against you, then your group's not going to go far. And they do this regularly with activists. Examples are what happened with Occupy and later Decolonize. They became really maligned in the media. Other examples are of the protests that took place at the RNC and the DNC in the U.S. Obviously, one of the biggest kind of anti-imperialist actions in the U.S. was the anti-NWO protests in Seattle, which were really negatively portrayed. And obviously you don't get the activist side of things as well, which is part of why I make videos, so I can, speak from a particular perspective about things and, not be spoken for. I mean, that's also really important, because otherwise people will just assume they know what you think and who you are. So this is the importance of speaking for yourself and speaking up when you see and hear things going down that you don't agree with and don't like. During the July 2001 meeting of the G8, several reports revealed that Italian police, masked as Black Bloc members, attacked demonstrators and small shops. Okay, this is another thing. I want to say that oftentimes when you're talking about let's say there's a protest, and the people in Portland, a lot of people hate the protests that go on here, but the reality is that a lot of the times the people that are doing property damage aren't actually activists. Okay, and if you see somebody who is 250 to 300 pounds of pure muscle in a Black Bloc fucking outfit, that is a cop, okay? Just straight up. That's a cop. You know, and they do this to discredit people and also to, like, I'm not going to get into like the whole black bloc situation, but it's a tactic of anonymity. And also, like, our Korean sisters do it as well. Like, a lot of them, like, wear masks so that they're not identified. And, you know, it's something to consider, to adopt, because it does, if you're going to have like a mass, I don't appreciate that language. All right, let's move on. If you're gonna, like, you know, participate in a mass, it helps to kind of have a level of anonymity, although it is important to understand that you're never fully anonymous, but it can help with certain situations because, as we see, especially with feminists, men like to take videos of women who are like doing feminist actions and often like target and harass those women. There are so many cases of like women who've like went viral for like a small action they were doing that somehow got like out, and so, you know, years later they're still go places and are recognized and get targeted, and so this is also something to be aware of. Okay. With a lack of public information, the police helped manipulate public discourse along the lines of how do legitimate demonstrators isolate activist thugs? Okay, but the police were the activist thugs. Slanderous propaganda can take the form of anonymous letters to or rumors aimed at the activist milieu. There are also examples where police will make uncorroborated casual accusations to journalists that, to use two examples, a person is a drug dealer, or that at a demonstration a person aimed a handgun at an officer. It is often for slanderous reasons that police charge activists with weapons possession, for having a penknife, or charges of violence like assault. You want up here? You want to say hi? You want to say hi? Do we need a break? All right, we need a cat break. Cat break. No. No, Tito says don't. Tito says don't trust the authorities. Don't trust authorities. Say it. No. No. Do you love me? Yeah. Okay. Okay. The growth of the anti-globalization movement has been accompanied by renewed anarchist scare propaganda on the part of authorities. Politicians and police attempt to massage public opinion. Stop. Preparing people for a crackdown in order to legitimate the use of heavier methods of social control, exclusion, and repression. They're doing it to protect you. Manipulative disinformation spread through the media needs to be denounced as lies. There are activist-friendly lawyers who can help us demand retractions and corrections. Speak to the journalists involved. Call them on their sloppy, dishonest work. Expose their hypocrisy and complain to the journalists' ethics body. We cannot rely on capitalist private media for any kind of fairness. And I also think it's important to like look at and judge media like correctly and understand that, hey baby, all media sites regardless have an agenda, so it's important to look at where they're coming from and what their agenda is. And I've had to like really confront this in the past year as well. Like, hi, do you love me? Say you love me. Oh no. I had to confront this as well because it's just media can't speak for you, okay? They just can't. And we're getting through this. There's a couple more pages. All right, you need to go. You need to go play. It is valuable for us to learn more about the covert actions of the police. There exists a long and documented history. Factual information about police covert activities also comes out as evidence presented in court. An important, too often neglected part of our strength is our knowledge of and our protection from police action against us. And this is a bit of art they have in the zine. I'll let you take a look at that for a moment. Stop. You're not getting this lap. Thank you, Kate. She says there are over 15,000 informants employed by the FBI. I don't know about the rates, but that sounds very probable. Hey, rude. Are you rude? Are you rude? You rude? Are you a rude dude? Okay. Let's continue. Your baby. Your baby. So this last section here, is this the last section? All right, well, second to last section. Moving against informers, considerations and alternatives. Taken from Protecting Ourselves from State Repression, a manual for revolutionary activists, published in 1984 by the Anti-Repression Resource Team, Jackson, Mississippi. Assuming that the security people involved, assuming that the security people, okay, you need to go. No. Let's try this again. Assuming that the security people within the group have suspicions about a group member being an informer, provocateur, it is useful for security leadership to resolve certain questions both before and after the investigation. A. How badly do you want to know whether the person is an agent or not? Clearly, if the person under suspicion is relatively important to the group's functioning, then leadership must know our way, one way or the other. The more important the person under suspicion is to the group, the more intensive the investigation. We may suggest methods of investigation which are unorthodox and from a certain point of view morally indefensible. But the question is always how badly the group needs to know. No group need use all or any of the methods we describe, but under the condition that the correct information is a life and death matter for the group. Certain drastic measures may be justified. B. What will be done if the information is inconclusive? Often there is not enough evidence to confirm that someone is a police agent, but there is enough evidence to confirm certain suspicions. A great deal will depend upon what is at stake with the person under suspicion. In general, the choices come down to 1. Labeling the person a security risk and acting accordingly. 2. Doing nothing outwardly but continuing the investigation. 3. Isolating the person from sensitive work but keeping him or her in the group. 4. Moving to a higher stage of investigation. C. What will be done if the person does turn out to be an agent? Well, common sense dictates that the person be exposed and severed from the group. Other actions might be initiated. If the presence of the agent is a real threat to the group, then the agent should be neutralized in an effective manner. Usually, wide exposure of the agent will accomplish an effective neutralization. But if the agent is no great threat to the group's functioning, the agent staying inside the group may be useful for other purposes. The group might decide that they prefer to keep the agent rather than risk not knowing who would replace a known quantity. If the agent is not in a sensitive position, can be monitored and isolated from important work, the group may want to keep such an agent at a low organizational level, or the agent might be given tasks that seem to be sensitive but are really not crucial to the group. Under the cover of doing sensitive work, false and semi-false information about the group can be relayed to the intelligence agencies that the agent belongs to, or perhaps certain information that is in fact true about the group can be willfully discredited by creation of pseudo events and or false information. Remember that when the intelligence agencies have a great deal of contradictory information, it decreases their ability to act decisively against the group. What are the responsibilities to other groups of the group's knowledge of an informer? If the group makes a decision to sever connection with the agent, it is certainly the group's responsibility to quietly contact leadership in other groups to warn them about the agent. Often, public exposure is done through the group's newspaper or newsletter/journal. In this case, the news article should be sent to a wide variety of groups. The more pressing problem is the instance where there are only suspicions but not decisive evidence. Experience has shown that suspicious Suspicions are taken seriously only when there is a political bond that exists between persons with long movement experience. People who have been in the movement a long time who are known to each other and trusted as dedicated movement people can convey agent suspicions that will get a favorable hearing or be readily believed. I wish this were true. This old hands trust network is relatively independent of political point of view. Veteran leaders of rival radical organizations can freely and easily exchange information on matters of security. And I think this is important too, because it doesn't matter that necessarily you're like involved in different activities or working on different causes. It is important to make sure that everyone is secure, because ultimately we're all in this together. You know, we have more in common with people who are trying to make the world a better place than those who aren't. And it's important to know who those people are. Your rights. Okay, so here's the last bit. We're going to discuss your rights. And then, if anyone has any responses that they want to make to this document and what we've kind of talked about tonight, please leave comments in the chat. If not, I'm going to check out and go relax. 1, your rights. You don't have to talk to the police or investigators. You do not have to talk to them on the street if you've been arrested or even if you're in jail. Do not talk about illegal actions with fellow inmates in holding, as they may be plants. 2, you don't have to let CSIS, which is like the Canadian FBI or whatever, CIA or whatever, or the police into your home or office unless they have a search or arrest warrant. Okay, don't let these people into your home unless they have a warrant. Demand to see the warrant. It must specifically describe the place to be searched and things to be seized. It must be authorized by a judge and should bear a signature. 3, if the police do present a warrant, you do not have to tell them anything other than your name, address, and birth date. Carefully observe the officers. You're in your own home. You're not required to stay in one room. You should take written notes of what they do, their names, badge numbers, and what agency they're from. Have friends who are present act as witnesses. It's risky to let cops roam around alone in your place because they can plant shit in your home. Remember that, and they often do. Police are not your friends, okay? 4, if the police try to question you or try to enter your home without a warrant, just say no. The police are very skilled at getting information from people. Hey, no. So attempting to outwit them is very risky. You can never tell how a seemingly harmless bit of information can hurt you or someone else. 5, anything you say to the police may be used against you and other people. Once you've been arrested, you can't talk. You can't talk your way out of it. Don't try to engage cops in a dialogue or respond to accusations. 6, you do not have to reveal. Okay, stop. You do not have to reveal your HIV status to the police or jail personnel. This is interesting. You've been arrested. You should refuse to take a blood test until you've been brought before a judge and have a lawyer of your choice. 7, you have a right to telephone a lawyer of your choice as soon as possible. This means after you've been arrested, charged, and booked into jail. This does not mean, however, that you'll be given the right to speak with your family and friends. This is left up to the discretion of the police involved in your case. 8, lying to the police is a crime. Okay? So don't lie to them. Don't tell them anything other than your name, your date of birth, and your address, but also don't fucking lie to them, because that'll get you jail time, okay? And if you're already under suspicion, or if you haven't done anything, let's say you get taken in, under some other, for some reason that isn't, there's no evidence or whatever, you're just being jailed, or you've just been arrested, right? Fraudulently. If you lie to them, then they have something on you, okay? So don't. 9, if you are nervous about simply refusing to talk, you may find it easier to tell them to contact your lawyer. Once a lawyer is involved, people will know more about your state, i.e., charges, bail, court date, etc. All right. And that's that. So, all in all, it's a lot of information to take in, and it's very heavy. And I know that, it doesn't seem like it's necessarily that. I think a lot of feminists in particular don't, look into this that much because, they're so unlikely to engage in illegal activity anyway. And I remember when the Women's March first happened, and the way that I heard people talking about it publicly was oh, it was so great, there was no violence, of course there was no violence, it was all women. For one, it's a problem if the public thinks that about your movement. It already means that they think that your movement isn't a threat to the status quo. If they're not worried about it, then that's a problem. But secondly, I know that's the perception, but most of the time when women have made gains in terms of our rights, in terms of securing control over our bodies, in terms of securing more access to resources and, control over our lives, it's been because of women taking direct action. And that may be the case of militant action, or it could be the case, some women in the past have done militant direct actions. And also direct action doesn't necessarily mean illicit activity. But women got involved in performing abortions in states where it was illegal before Roe v. Wade in the U.S. There's an example. Those women were breaking the law. And, this is the case. Unjust laws are meant to be broken. They have to be broken. So remember that, and, don't think that it's necessarily wrong for people to do this. But if you are going to engage in illicit activities, it is important to protect yourself and to not only protect yourself, but protect others. And also be aware of attempts to neutralize or kind of discredit radicals and be suspicious about behavior. Again, one example I want to say that came up in the last year, there's several people, several women specifically, that I've interacted with in the past year that I'm highly suspicious of. But one of them was, here's an example. I'm just going to give you this example. I became like Facebook friends with a woman who was running a publication, and this publication, you know, this woman had claimed to be anti-pornography, okay, for example. Now, being anti-porn, you know, a lot of people have come to me and told me they're anti-porn in the past year as well, and not been. And I think that the level to with which people aren't aware of like what pornography is really frustrating and dumb, or like what it means to be anti-porn. But anyway, this woman claimed to be anti-porn, and she was regularly posting like really objectifying things about women, and I was just like, okay, whatever, this person's a jackass. Up until the point that she posted on her Facebook that she had went to the Playboy Mansion. Now, mind you, she was running a publication that was printing anti-porn like articles, and she herself was claiming to be anti-porn. Now, I confronted her about this, and I was met with ridicule. And this is a tactic that is consistently employed, okay? Ridicule. Like, make it seem absurd. I was like, I thought you were anti-porn. What are you doing at the Playboy Mansion? Something to that effect. And she, like, was basically incredibly dismissive and said that Playboy isn't pornography. So clearly this is a person who's got no fucking principles whatsoever, okay? Like, that's just clear, because like Playboy is responsible for the proliferation of the porn culture that we're in. I mean, Playboy helped legitimize and market pornography to tons of people, and also made it seem benign and like playful. You know, it's in many ways like the gateway pornography. So, you know, I'm just mentioning this, okay, to be very suspicious of people, their motivations and their intentions. Now, later on, like, I unfriended this woman pretty quickly. I think I unfriended her at that point, and I was just like, my response was like, you're vile, you know, because, and of course, like, nobody took me seriously in terms of doing that. I think people are still up her ass being like, woohoo, keep acting like a jackass, right? But I was informed by someone else that she had posted on her Facebook that she had been approached by the FBI, this woman that I'm talking about, that she had been approached by the FBI and asked to become an informant. Now, the only reason why I think somebody would say that is because she was an informant, and also to spread kind of like paranoia and distrust. Now, there are informants in every social movement, and you know, I recently spoke to a friend and kind of told her about what I had been experiencing, kind of some of the weird shit that had been going on in my life, specifically in like women who had been acting really weird and disrupting my life. And she was like, well, why on earth would anyone care? And I'm like, well, let's take radical feminism to its logical conclusion, okay? If my ideas, okay, let's just say like my ideas were to become mainstream, society would change radically, okay? So there is a vested interest in silencing and disrupting movements that are radical, period, okay? And it's really kind of frustrating to, not have it taken seriously. And I think part of the reason why people don't take it seriously as well is because it is a women's movement, and people don't really take women's activism as seriously as they do men's, because obviously we're not violent in the same ways that men are. So, but regardless, if, okay, let's just picture it, okay? Women decide, like, over 50% of women decide to, like, start living their life, like, apart from men, like, to separate, to, like, collectively live, etc. It would create a situation in the US which would greatly challenge the social structure and order that we have. Alternative ways of living are discouraged, unless they can be co-opted and made, like, into a way of consumption, which is part of why the whole, like, LGBTQ rainbow kind of identity is being marketed to by so many companies, because, like, if you can get, and love is love kind of thing being marketed by corporations, if you can get people into partnerships where they're continuing to consume at the same level as, like, heterosexuals, and even now consuming new and different forms of, like, reproductive technology and, like, medical technologies, you have people who you can market to, and you can continue to grow capital from. And ultimately, if your lifestyle can be marketed to in that way, if it can continue to be economically viable, then it'll be fine with the system. If it's not, then it won't be. So there is a great deal of disruption against radical politics, radical movements, period. And to not take that seriously is, like, a real problem, and is something that we do need to take seriously. And when people come forward and tell you that, like, they are being targeted, it is important to take it seriously. Or if people are acting fucking weird, like saying they're anti-porn, for example, and then, like, going to the Playboy Mansion. This is just an example. I don't want to, like, harp on that woman specifically because I don't fucking care. But, I mean, I do care, but, like, it's, like, one instance. But that is, pay attention to shit like that, because that shit is, like, serious. That kind of thing is incredibly difficult. And sometimes these people are just testing what they can get away with as well. Like, the fact that, like, more women weren't like, what the fuck, is also a problem. That's also, like, quite telling. So it's important to have high standards as well, and to not compromise so much. I think as radical feminists, a lot of the times it can be difficult not to compromise because you're so isolated. Or we're so isolated, so that you're, like, willing to kind of put up with shit that, like, otherwise wouldn't be acceptable. And it can be hard to be the fucking harpy all the time. But it's important to, like, stick to your principles, because, like, if those go, then you're already insecure. Your movement's already insecure. Like, if there's a, like, level of tolerance for kind of fuckery like that. Okay. Let me read some of the comments. I see that John Land Nick Mouse wrote, thanks for being... I don't even want to read that. Like, can I just say this? Like, I already have written on my channel that men need to, like, shut the fuck up on this channel and listen. But like that kind of shit is, again, like, don't use me or pit me against other women, okay? Like, really, if you think that the work I do is relevant and interesting and helpful to your development as a person, like, that's great. But I really don't want to hear about how I'm like one of the feminists who isn't brain dead, okay? Like, that's like really not a compliment. It's actually insulting. And it's just, it's also like, you don't like liberal feminists? Um, who cares? Like, I guarantee that, like, you know, a lot of liberal feminists like have legitimate grievances and have things they need, that they talk about that are relevant, you know, as women, and they should be listened to. Women need to be listened to, period. One of the big problems is that men only legitimate women that they fucking agree with or that they want to fuck, okay? That's the problem. How about like you just like let women speak for themselves and like take them seriously in that? Like, it's hard enough for women to fucking speak. And yeah, there's a lot of brain dead people on YouTube. There's a lot of brain dead people everywhere. Period. Most people are fucking dumb. I don't want to say that, but a lot of people are fucking dumb, and a lot of the content that gets shit out here is just shit. Sarah Symmetra did a question emoji and then said true. I don't know what you're responding to, but I bet it was. Split Second says hi, and then Sarah sent me a heart. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they would like to say about this topic, or anything in this vein they would like me to talk about before I head out? Because I'm here now, so it's the time to address anything also that was in this material tonight that was kind of heavy. I agree it made no sense, but like when I protested this to other people, I was treated like some kind of fucking pariah, you know? So, what can you do? I think, you know, in recent times, like a lot of people kind of decided to gut kind of an interest in radical feminism in order to kind of promote their brands a bit more. So I've seen that with like several people, or it's different groups, like, or not groups, just like, you know, it's kind of edgy and interesting now. So like people are like taking what they can of it. It's typical fucking political opportunism in order to like secure yourself, without any real attachment to the politics. Hey baby. Look, my my three favorite words. Look, you are right. You are right. Isn't that my favorite thing to hear? You love hearing that, don't I? I love hearing that I'm right. Yeah. You ever been right all along? Best feeling ever. Actually, it's not. It fucking sucks. Yeah. I'm sorry you didn't get an alert. I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna try and go live, like I said, pretty regularly for the foreseeable future. Trying to push myself to be more active. So, anyway, Yeah, I kind of see it as a philosophy. I had a friend kind of like say that to me once, and I was like, yeah, you're right. I mean, it is an identity for a lot of people, but I think like when it becomes like the identity, then it, a lot gets lost, you know? And I think I don't know, it's important not to like see ourselves in that way. Oh, I've never taken care of a really old cat. So I don't know how to take care of them. I think like just make sure to feed them well and give them their water and like play with them and like let them sleep and give them lots of love. I don't know. I have a very demanding cat who's special needs. That's what I call him because he has like a lot of issues and he was a feral. So, I mean, what I can say about what I know is that, they need to be given a level of care and support for themselves as individuals. I mean, how old a cat are we talking here? I don't know. I mean, yeah, I've never really taken care of a really old cat. I moved from home. Ooh, he's getting feisty again. I moved from home, when I was like 19, and I left my cat, Panther, and he passed away a couple years later. But he was still only like 16, probably, maybe 15. Ow! Oh, you're a dick. Ooh. So I didn't really take care of him in his old age. I mean, sometimes, like, it's just about making sure that they get everything they need and, like, observing them, I think. Same as any cat. Oh. Ooh. Ooh. Like, my cat needs a lot of play. And he needs a lot of attention. And he needs to dominate. Like, period. He has to be the center of things a lot of the time. And, so I play with him and I give him, like, his own space and, yeah. Ow, stop being that way. Stop. You're hurting me. Do you want me to show the people what you did to me? Alright. Anyway. I don't know. I guess be gentle with it then. Be gentle with it and feed it really fattening food. Alright, no, you're not coming back up here. You're a dick. No. 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 Alright, does anyone else have any other questions? Because I'm about to head out. It's been like over 2 hours. Or comments. Alright then, I'm gonna head out. It's been real. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And I hope you continue to keep yourself secure. As I said, I'm going to put the website for this publication in the description box of the video. So when it goes up, which will be in like a few minutes after this recording's over, it'll be there for those of you who wanted your own kind of copy. And I know that like whatever new copy they've come out with is going to be a lot more updated. All I have to say, I haven't been to the website. So actually, why don't I go there now and make sure it still exists before I promise this.
Okay.
Ah, good times. Where was it? Okay. Get my phone out and just look. Security dot tau dot ca. Go. Okay, it is done. Okay. Shit. Well, I guess it's not really available, but I will look for security culture is something that it's a concept that's been around for a while. So I will look for some other material so that you have it available when you need it. And yeah, thanks for being here. Be sure to, before you go, like the video, share it with anyone who might need it. Again, I recommend maybe sharing it with a group or in a group setting. And, yeah, if you're not subscribed, subscribe. And with that, I bid you adieu. Have a good night and stay secure. Goodbye.